we use this word leadership, and in the word, it says lead. That would kind of indicate that you're somewhere in the front leading. But what happens if you look behind you and nobody else is there? Are you still a leader?
This week on the Shameless Podcast.
If people do not choose to follow you, you're not a leader. And it doesn't make a difference what your title is. Someone once said to me that my noise to effectiveness ratio was out of whack.
Hold on,
Meaning,
what is that?
the amount of static that I brought into my interactions was much higher than my technical effectiveness. Have you ever worked with somebody and you're like, okay, they're nice, they're smart, but I can't stand being around them?
Yeah. Yes.
That was me. That was me.
Okay.
Why didn't you tell me that you're so stressed you're not sleeping at night? Why didn't you tell me that, you're going through these things? A resilient leader always shares how challenging it is to be resilient.
Why? So the quote of the episode is a Brene Brown quote. I love a little bit of Brene Brown, as you clearly do too. And the quote itself says, "Shame erodes the very part of us that believes we are capable of change." Sometimes we are afraid to do something. You fear shame. I don't want shame. We're trying to break that burden by sharing stories of courage, resilience, and we want to be able to celebrate your story.
Shameless.
Hey everybody, Shameless family. My name is Dzikamai Gangaidzo and I'm the host of the Shameless Podcast. And today we're going to be working on first name basis. I think it's a little bit easier just for the sake of, everybody involved. I've got Yosi here today and I am absolutely fascinated because we're going to be talking about resilience and well-being, balancing leadership demands with the personal health. Yosi, welcome to the episode or to the podcast.
Thank you, Ziggy. I'm so excited to be here. And yes, first names is probably the way to go for us.
It's hilarious because I looked at your surname and I was like, gosh, okay, and this is how people must feel when they look at my name. So we're going to skip that whole debacle. We'll just stick with first names. I'm good. We're happy to do this. And as always, really appreciate you joining us today. And I would love to really understand one thing. And that is, how does somebody who was a CTO, brains in the technology space, really driving performance tech. And that was probably before CTO was as hot as it was now, but guess maybe, anyways, it was a while back. And then you just say, you know what, never mind this. I am going in this completely or slightly different route. And I'm going to be focusing on leadership development and the ability for people to be better leaders through not only understanding themselves, but also understanding the tools that they require in order to be better at leading others. How? Why? Surely a CTO's got more money than this. Please fill me in.
Sure. So, I think unfortunately many technical leaders have discovered that you can be a subject matter expert. You can be as smart as Einstein in your technical field. And yet that doesn't translate to being excellent with other people. It doesn't translate to getting others to follow you, to getting work done through others. And the higher up you go in an organization, I call it the X factor of leadership, which is at the very top of this chain, you've got all of the authority to make decisions, but you don't do any of the work. At the bottom, right, you've got all the responsibility to do the work, but none of the authority to make the decisions. How often do you see a disconnect between the people who are out in the field doing the work and saying, why is leadership doing that? Why are they doing what they're doing? And that type of disconnect creates a waste of performance. It slows work down, creates so much trouble, it creates turnover. And when you are sitting there at the top and you remember, it's like, sometimes I don't know if you've got kids, Ziggy, but when my kid said, Dad, you don't understand. I'm like, I remember saying that to my parents. And I was sure that when I said that to my parents, they didn't understand.
They did not understand. They had no clue.
No clue, right? But what I realized is I actually do understand, kind of, but I don't know how to get away from where I am today as a parent and feeling responsible and knowing all the dangers and all of these things. And so when you are sitting there at the top, you are being fed information about the market share and the business side of things and continuity and financial things. And you're like making decisions for a whole set of topics and issues that are not visible to anybody down doing the work. And like talking to a kid who's never been an adult, how do I communicate those challenges meaningfully to the doers of the work? And even more challenging is how to get them to care about it, because they're not the ones who are dealing with that, but they equally feel that I don't care about what they're dealing with because I'm making stupid decisions from their points of view. What I realized based on the feedback was I was great as an engineer. It got me all the way to where that is, but I wasn't great with people. I wasn't great at helping people understand why we're doing something. I wasn't great at helping people, to use this word I used before, follow me, right? So, Ziggy, we use this word leadership, and in the word, it says lead. That would kind of indicate that you're somewhere in the front leading. But what happens if you look behind you and nobody else is there? Are you still a leader?
No. You're just walking at that point.
You're just walking, right? And so someone said to me, what really defines leadership is followship. If people do not choose to follow you, you're not a leader. And it doesn't make a difference what your title is. You could be chief bottle washer or only bottle washer, but if people are willing to follow you, you're a leader. And Ziggy, you're a leader, man. You got a podcast and you got followers. So rock on. And
Go
you
for it,
are a leader. And it is not done because you are an amazing engineer.
That's interesting, and that's beautiful, and I appreciate that. Why I find that it particularly interesting is because a lot of the time you have strong technical individuals who have made their reputation, developed their ego, developed their confidence on the basis of the technical ability. But then when you then swing it over to the ability to gain followership, the ability to inspire, the ability to lead, those are two very different skill sets. From your experience, then, how do you then transition from point A to point B? Because that's the secret. That's the secret sauce. That's the secret recipe. That's the $9 billion question, because it's, no, I don't know why 9 billion, not 100 billion, but but I mean, I'm fascinated by that idea because it seems so easy, seems so natural, seems so logical that a logical, practical, problem-solving individual might be able to translate into, you see a problem, blah, 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 I can fix it. Done. It's fixed. Done. So why is it so hard to translate, and what could we do to make that transition a little bit easier or better?
So that was the question that I found myself needing to solve when I kept on getting feedback that even knowing what active listening is didn't help me be an active listener, that knowing what it means to be collaborative didn't help me translate that into the behavior of being collaborative, of allowing for collaboration, of being quiet and not always stating my opinion and making sure everyone knew how much I knew. Or even if it wasn't about everyone knowing how much I knew, I didn't have patience for it to be wrong. I wanted to hear what they had to say unless they were wrong, which was most of the time. And therefore I didn't really want to hear what they had to say, right? And when I started recognizing that, someone once said to me that my noise to effectiveness ratio was out of whack.
Hold on.
Meaning,
What is that?
the amount of static that I brought into my interactions was much higher than my technical effectiveness.
No, you're going to have to
Essentially-
rephrase that. Go for it. Sorry.
Okay. Have you ever worked with somebody and you're like, okay, they're nice, they're smart, but I can't stand being around them?
Yeah. Yes.
That was me.
Okay. All right.
So my static, my noise that I gave off
Okay. All right.
was more disruptive
Then
than my effectiveness, my knowledge, my skills.
And then curiosity, because I mean, we're going to talk about that professional and the balance between professional and personal. How did that translate I mean, in your personal life, I mean, do you that static also as equally disruptive in your personal life? How easy was it for you to separate those two worlds?
So, I liked to make believe, and I talk to so many other people who would like to make believe that I'm a different person at home than I am at work.
Aren't we all?
But
I
when
mean,
you
aren't we all?
But then when we go talk to your spouse or your partner and or your children, you find out, no, not really different at all. It's got other context, meaning you're talking about different things. But if you're not a good listener, if you think that everybody else is dumber than you, if you think you always have the right answer, that plays out at home as well as it plays out at work. And, I really thought when I started learning the skills, when I started going through the therapeutic training, that I thought my wife was a saint. Like, why did she marry me and why did she put up with me? And she is a saint, notwithstanding. What I
Yeah.
discovered is how many other partners are saints, because I talk to so many other people and find out that, they're dealing with their partner who is just like this, and they're still with them because there are things to love even in that. So by the grace of God, people stay with us even when we're not being at our best. And what I feel grateful for was that I found a way to start to learn about my emotions and self-awareness and how to recognize that no matter how logical I am and see the world and make sense of the world, that it doesn't negate the fact that my emotions are there and that they're playing a role in my life. What became clear was that by not understanding them, by not understanding how to recognize, process, work healthily with myself, that became this noise, this disruption that lowered my effectiveness in every realm. And for me, it took many years to break apart the shells, the ideas, the ego, what you called it, around all of this. And as an engineer, I said, okay, now I want to reverse engineer what I just went through, my 5 years of training, and really work with technical people, engineering, logic minded, data driven people who are finding that they are awesome at what they do. They're just not awesome at doing with other people, or that, they've achieved this leadership level at whatever, that is in the organization, but they're still not getting things done the way they want. The team is not aligned. The people aren't following through. There's friction in the organization. And that ends up taking, like, I was talking to a leader today, and he said to me, he goes, what I thought would happen when I got to the director level was I would have more influence. And he goes, I'm spending all my time just dealing with people stuff and it's draining me. And by the end of the conversation, and it's not just a single coaching session, but by the end of the first conversation, he is like, wow, if I could start to put into practice some of the things we talked about, then I probably will be more effective. And that will give me the time to go do the things that I was dreaming about doing at this level.
That's interesting. That's incredibly, because sometimes it does feel like you can't learn some of those elements. You can't, you get stuck in your way, right? I am what I am. This is who I am, and well, this is could not deal with me. It ends up being the sentiment that you feel, because either it seems like the journey of learning and development is difficult or long or not possible, or you just don't have the tools, right? I mean, and then at the end of the day, you just dig your feet in, you bury your shoulder deep, and you're like, well, I'm the boss. You're gonna have to just stick up and put up, right? And then what you just shared with me is essentially completely the opposite. It's that hope that something could actually move or change from there, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
So,
It's, Ziggy, what's interesting is I have rarely met people who haven't heard the ideas of collaboration, listening, patience. So it's not the idea. It's not even like I could give you steps. Step one, do this. Step two, do this. It's how do you translate that into your world, into Ziggy's mind, into Ziggy's heart, into Ziggy's experiences. And that's where I'm finding that for these human skills, a book doesn't often get people there. Even talking about it on a podcast, actually, I think is much more effective because you get to hear like a live example. So I'm going to ask you a question. Okay.
Slightly afraid, but go for it.
Okay. So in the last week or two, did you hear anything on the news that upset you?
Yeah. Yes. A lot.
A lot. And when you got upset, did it impact any other part of your life that day?
Yes. Yes. It changes the mood, really.
Right. So it's
Yeah.
not just the one event, it ripples.
It ripples.
Now,
Yes.
okay. Can you give me just like a highlight of what that news event was?
News event was around, don't want to go into too much politics.
No, not too much detail. Just
yeah. No, look, it was about how a double standard essentially against how certain countries get treated compared to other countries, right? And
Okay.
at the end of the day, you feel like the justice associated and the efforts associated to my efforts. I'm trying to change the world. I'm trying to make impact. But if we're not playing on a fair playing field, then what am I trying to do?
Okay. Thank you. So now imagine for a second that you approached that news article, or I don't know what it was, audio or whatever, with a mindset of what if there's things in here that I don't know? What if there's something in here? Essentially, if you let go of all of your assumptions,
Yes.
you went and listened to it with a space of what if I don't actually understand what I'm hearing? Okay, just imagine going back to that event, that news event that you read or listened to, and you applied a mindset of what if I actually don't know what they're really saying? What if maybe some things are not being said here? What if not all the information is being presented? What if I don't really understand what's happening behind the scenes? Okay, just think about this for a second. What would have changed if you had approached that event with this curiosity?
I guess I would have been more, I'd have tried to add more context to the emotions I'm feeling, right? I'd have gone, okay, maybe this, maybe that. I would have had a lot more leeway to not conclude on the matter and therefore not be so taken down by what I concluded. I listened, I heard, I concluded, and then my mood then changed. But the reality is that if I had the view that there was more to learn into that, I couldn't conclude. I try to understand further, and I would therefore not be able to get to the point where I get upset or I get disappointed.
How do you think that would have then affected the rest of your day?
It wouldn't have impacted the rest of my day because if anything, I would have gone in a more curious way, right? My day would have been more trying to understand as opposed to trying to react or trying to, being I don't want to say victim of the circumstance, but that's what it would have been in the end, right? I would have been more inquisitive about what had happened in that moment.
Now, imagine maybe some recent-ish event at work where you were told something or heard something or they announced something that made you unhappy. Can you think of one?
Yep.
Okay. What if you applied the same curiosity?
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know everything here. Maybe there's something I'm not being told, or maybe there's something they forgot to say here or something. What would have shifted in the way you responded to that information if you applied curiosity?
Patience. I would have been able to step back a bit more and not get carried away. Right. That's
Sounds pretty freaking amazing. Now imagine what might have changed with everybody who was around you who were feeding off of your energy at that time.
yeah. I mean, that ripple effect would have had multiple ripple effects as well, right? It would have been that ability to not mess up somebody's day.
So you mentioned earlier about resilience. Part of resilience for me and burnout is the part we're playing because we bring in all of these assumptions, all of these pre-ideas, these judgments, and we don't question it. We go whole hog into what an idiot, what this, not fair, or whatever. And I won't even go into the word not fair for a second, but and it just like it takes over. Like we get angry, we get frustrated, we get annoyed, we get overwhelmed, we get whatever. And it doesn't just end when we turn the channel or turn off the thing or stop reading. It lingers, and we might bring it home. We bring it to the people at work compared to like, what if? there's something I'm missing here? What if I don't understand everything? What if I recognize how many assumptions I'm putting into this, that I'm creating this additional context for all of this? What changes in my life?
That's beautiful. And I think for me, then it's that idea of being able to stop, ask yourself, what am I missing? Then allows for you to carry a level of empathy on the other side of that conversation, because we get really trapped in our own problem, our own struggle, our own everything, that we fail to then. But then that's heavy, that's tiring, that's draining, like you said. And what do you feel that plays a part into that burnout that you, and how does that play a massive part into burnout?
So now let's think about this idea that I need you to work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, or 15 hours a day. What if when you boss said, we got to get this done by the end of the week, right? You got to, I don't know, excavate this much minerals, or, whatever it is that you're excavating or mining, right? And you said to yourself, what if I didn't really understand him the way I think I did? What if the way I just think I heard him wasn't what he said? How would you then respond in that conversation?
Ask for more clarity, ask for understanding. And you don't get into your own head and be like, gosh, he's asking me to do this mammoth task without understanding how difficult it might be. Or you just go down this rabbit hole of expectation that's not necessarily being fully explored, I guess.
Now, it doesn't mean it solves everything. However, I cannot tell you how many times I'm working with people and they're telling me all of these things that are happening, and the lack of choice, the lack of freedom. And then I say, okay, let's have a three-way. Let's sit down and talk to your manager. We approach it with this, well, this is how I understood it. Is that what you meant? And they're like, no. And why didn't you tell me that you're so stressed you're not sleeping at night? Why didn't you tell me that, you're going through these things? Yes, we have these deadlines, but let's talk about how do we bring some other people in for this rush thing that we need to do. But so, Ziggy, you a mind reader?
No, I wish I
You know
was.
any mind readers?
Well, my wife gets me pretty spot on a lot of the time, but besides her, I don't know nobody else.
So certainly not our bosses, but we think, but of course they know. Of course they should know. To me, the word should needs to be eviscerated from our vocabulary. No one's going to know if we don't tell them. And so a lot of what I encounter with people who are burning out, I don't want to say is self-wrought, but it is most of the time not as a result of good communication, not as a result of curiosity.
But then with that's very empowering, because that then suggests that by better communication, by increased curiosity, we could actually manage this a lot better. Yes, there might be moments of increased workload, reduced workload, but at the end of the day, the communication, the curiosity allows for us to understand each other and actually meet each other somewhere.
Yeah.
So then I got a question. A lot of the time we drive people hard. I mean, results, right? KPIs, KPIs, KPIs. How then do we balance this idea of empathy, understanding with KPIs, right? I mean, it sounds fantastic what you talked about. It's if I communicate better, if I have increased curiosity, then surely we can come to an understanding. But that doesn't change the KPI. It doesn't change what I'm trying to realize and what I'm trying to get by the period. So how on earth do I then appreciate that there's X expected of me, but I also have to look after myself within that same time frame? And maybe sometimes those two things don't align.
Yeah. So I wish there was a magical answer, and I don't know it if there is. So I'm going to give you an analogy though. Let's say you're 20 pounds overweight, and now you learn about tools and techniques to really shift your eating habits, really shift your emotional relationship to food. Okay. Are you going to lose the weight overnight? You got to work it off. So some of the time when we come to the awareness, we find ourselves in situations that we can't immediately pull out of in this very second. However, what we can do is start to shift what happens going forward. We can have conversations about, first of all, there's a curiosity in that of, is the way that I am making sense of these KPIs the way that they mean them? Now we might say, well, the KPIs are numbers. So, if I have to mine X amount of whatever and it's being weighed, then that's what it is. And I've still found that when we can be curious and say, okay, here's how I'm interpreting what you're asking of me, these metrics you're asking of me, and this is the time frame. Is that what you mean? And they might say yes. And then I will say, great. And how do you understand how much people power it takes to bring about that deliverable? They might say, sure, of course. And you could say, okay, so how many people do you think that it requires on the crew to do that? And they're going to say a number that's not matching the number. And then you're saying, okay, so what if I told you that one person can excavate this much in an hour with the tools that we have? Okay, so now let's do the math. So for me to get to this number that you ask, I can do that. And here's the options: 40 more people on the crew, or upgraded equipment on the crew, or both, or we replace all the people with robots. Which one do you want to do? Because what you're asking for, we'll do it. I'm not saying no. I'm saying to do that, I need either robots replacing all of the people, or I need this much more people, or this much more equipment, or whatever. You make the decision, boss, which one you're going to give me to get that KPI that you made up without asking us.
Yeah.
And that's where it comes into this X again, because I'm making decisions based on something, on a metric that I don't understand anymore. But if we don't respond with that curiosity, then we can't change anything. It's not going to be easy, right? None of these things, whether it's losing the weight or managing our stress, they're not things that are easy, but they're not hard either. They're more in the space of uncomfortable. And I really intentionally use the difference between, oh, that's hard to do, and I don't know what that definition is by people, versus is it just uncomfortable to do? Is it uncomfortable to have that conversation?
And so then once we have established a sort of a line of communication and or the ability to be curious, right? My question then naturally gravitates to the ability to sustain, the ability to create a culture that encourages that, right? Because I do believe that starting something is fantastic, but keeping it, that's where the real power comes in. That's where the real juice comes in. And there's nothing more easy to drop away than something that's hard or uncomfortable, How do we then move that from that first step to then become more sustainable?
So do you like being alone?
Not really. No. Sometimes.
Do you like being alone with your thoughts though?
No. That's even worse. I prefer the first question than the second.
Yeah. Now just think, but how often do you share your deeper inner thoughts with others? How often do you share with other people your development, your personal development, things that you're working on?
No, I don't share that.
So you do like being alone with your thoughts then?
Yes.
Yeah. That's not what it means to be human. We are herd animals. We are people. We survive in groups, in tribes, in communities. We were never meant to try to battle growth in our own heads. And we know this in certain areas of our life, like gym buddies. If you're going to want to really, go to the gym, get a gym buddy who, somebody's going to be waiting for you at the gym. And so you're going to oh, I can't let him down, or I can't let her down, or them down. And therefore I need to, I'm going to show up. So when we want to sustain a change, make it part of the community. Tell everybody, this is what I'm trying to do. I want you to hold me accountable. I want you to say, Ziggy, how come you're not sharing your thoughts today? Ziggy, how come you didn't ask with curiosity today? If you really want to go the extra mile, an idea I heard from a guy named Marshall Goldsmith, he's a coach, put money down. Say to a group of people around you, okay, I am going to try to react with more curiosity going forward. And I want you guys to call me out if you don't see me doing it. And here are some examples of what to look for, okay? Because no one's going to read your mind. And then you say to them, every time you call me out, I'm going to put $1 in the community chest. And at the end of the month, we'll all go go out for a drink or dinner based on how much money I end up putting in that pot. Let me tell you, buddy, after a couple of bucks go in that pot, you're going to start to remember and they're going to be really happy about reminding you. So we build in accountability. we build in a community of people that help us make the change. A lot of times, not every time, a lot of times other people get in on it too. They're like, oh, that actually is valuable to do that. I want to do that too. Okay, guys, I'm in. Hold me accountable. I'll put $1 in every time I don't do it either. And then you get the third person in, and Ziggy, it's no longer a group of people making a change; it's a movement.
Yeah, beautiful. And I guess that's the basis, the very practical way to ripple out into a culture, right? Because it will start somewhere. It starts within individuals, then that can easily grow, and the more it grows, the more the community grows, the more the accountability grows, the more the culture grows, the more and it just expands. Before you know it, everybody's is a part of it. And that's what it means to be
And
a part of it.
it is. And to also recognize that this part of being called out is critical, right? Do you have kids?
No.
Have you ever seen a little baby crawling? Have you ever seen a little baby try to learn how to walk?
Yeah.
What happens when they try to learn how to walk?
They
hobble, they
for
wobble, they
something.
fall
Yeah.
down, right?
Yeah.
But no one says, oh my God, you fell down. You're a stupid baby. Why don't you
No.
know how to walk already, right? We all know that falling down is part of learning how to walk. But then we grow up and we like, oh, if I did that wrong, then I'm
an idiot.
But change takes falling down and getting back up and falling down and getting back up. And when we show the vulnerability, to do the Brene Brown thing, that we are willing to make visible to others our process of learning and growth, it gives other people permission to do the same thing, because we don't change like a light bulb or a light switch where we just go bing, bing. These changes of acting with curiosity, etc., is for me a lifelong process. Even though I learned it years ago, and even though I coach on it a lot, trust me, man, my wife will say, hey, where's your curiosity? And I'm like, oh, good. She's not making me put the dollar in, but
Oh yeah, that's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And it's I guess that's the thing. It's about if you appreciate that whole idea, the notion of resilience, mental health, mental wealth, then I think sometimes why we struggle to make that change is because we want that change to happen so quickly. We want that change to be like dropping 20 pounds over a weekend or overnight. And we don't then put in the community to then help you get to that place. You keep everything the same and then you expect everything to change at the same time. That's what I picked from what you just shared, which is absolutely beautiful. And so I would love. I've got 2 questions on a quick fire question round that I would love to really switch this up on. And obviously, what better context is around that burnout and health, mental health. Please finish this sentence for me.
Okay.
A resilient
leader always shares how challenging it is to be resilient.
Why?
Because that makes you human. What is resiliency? How are we going to do it if it's only in our head? How do I decompress if I can't find people to share my challenge with? How do I feel that I'm not alone in my struggle if I never share my struggle? So that's why.
Okay, that's beautiful, because so I'm gonna just I've got a second one, and it's supposed to be quick fire, so we kind of like it's not really working right now. It's just it is what it is. But I mean, so you say that a leader has to share in order to be resilient. That feels very different to what the definition of what a leader typically would be, right? Wouldn't a leader be more, I'm in the front, follow me, and, don't mind like, we're not talking about vulnerability here. I am in command. Like, how do you then balance out that idea of the respect, the leadership that I'm in charge, with that vulnerability of sharing and being open and unpacking, so that you too can be human in the moment of your own weakness?
So I will say that Brene Brown can explain this much better than I can any day. And we, in the end of the day, are human before we are whatever title or position we have. And everybody feels alone when they're in their own head. Everybody feels nobody understands, or this is only me. And what builds trust is knowing that you're human, knowing that you too have your challenges and are trying to grow and develop. And the idea of followship requires trust. And trust isn't an idea, it's a feeling, it's an emotion. And it comes when I am willing to give over some element of my safety, my wellness, my well-being, my effectiveness, to you and follow you. It doesn't make a difference if you are physically in the front or in the back. But if you want that, then I've got to feel like you have an understanding of me. And if you're not willing to show me that we have something in common, then how will I ever feel you understand me or that I understand you? And then there is no leadership. There's just, as you said, some guy walking.
Back to the quickfire round, because I got a second question. And the problem is, I feel like I could go down this rabbit hole, but no. So the second one is about daily rituals, right? Like, is there anything related to a daily ritual that just really can galvanize and help that ability to build resilience, to the ability to build that mental strength or that balance in what we define as a mental strength, right? Is there something that we could work towards on a daily basis that just makes us that much stronger?
So I find that there is not one thing that resonates for everybody. But there is a list that is not, again, new, not my creation at all. One of them is gratitude. If I can find 3 things to be grateful for each day, doesn't have to be big, nothing, but I just say to the universe, thank you for the sun today. Thank you for having a house over my head today. Thank you for having a job today. And if I can say it while actually trying to connect to the feeling of what it means to have a house over my head, that I find works for some people. Another one is if I find myself driving myself crazy with thoughts, catastrophizing, fears, worries, find somebody I can share them with. And to me, that is a daily ritual because every day we're thinking and every day we're worrying about something. If we can find somebody to share it with, it transforms our life when we can speak it out loud and we know somebody's listening. Another one is physical exercise. Do something. Do something every day. Walk up and down the stairs for 5 minutes. Walk up and down the block for 5 minutes. Do something that is just movement based for 5 minutes. It does a whole bunch of internal physiological things, which we may not appreciate how valuable that is. And so if you live in a hot climate, do it inside. If you live in a cold climate, do it inside. If you live in a moderate climate, do it outside, but move for 5 minutes.
Beautiful. So I really thank you for that. And I think so many insightful aspects around what we've just talked about and the entire podcast. And what I always do is I look for a quote of the episode. The quote of the episode, I have just sort of looked for it, made it up as we discussed all of this. So I'm now going to take the quote of the episode and I'm going to try to fuse in the summary of what we just talked about.
Okay.
And we're going to see how well I was listening to what you were saying or how well this whole thing went in my head. And no pressure on me. Damn it. I just put pressure on myself. So the quote of the episode is a Brene Brown quote. I love a little bit of Brene Brown, as you clearly do too. And the quote itself says, "Shame erodes the very part of us that believes we are capable of change." Shame erodes the very part of us that believes we are capable of change. And for me, what we have talked about today around resilience, well-being, balancing leadership with our demands stems from that ability, the curiosity, and the openness to change. And I'd like to just rewind all the way back. Whether it is you getting into ACT role, being very technically strong, and then realizing that, I am a bit of a jerk. I am carrying my fears, and my fears are essentially spilling into different components of my personal life, but also the way that I lead. Then that shame that was eroding and diminishing yourself ended up even impacting your health. And I think this was something that we talked about earlier. That shame was eroding your capability of what you could achieve, but even more so, the fact that you could change. And the fact that you then took yourself into a space where that emotional wellness therapy, where you unraveled what it means to be in touch with your emotions, to be more holistic as an individual, to understand how not only that you were wired in a way that you turned around, looked into the room, and you're like, why is everyone crying and I'm not crying, right? And
Right.
and then you had to tap into who you were, what you were, and you had to appreciate the value of change that could essentially come from that. And the choice that you had to make in order to be able to go, I'd rather not react, but I'd rather choose to be able to work within a space, to be able to bring myself into a space and then do more to empower others and be better. And I mean, you talked about that X factor because at the end of the day, a lot of people sit at a place where the context of their experience is completely different to somebody else's context, but yet we run on that assumption that we know, we've concluded, our world is everybody else's world, and we never then ask ourselves, what if the context might be different? And sometimes that idea, the fear of asking others what if, or asking ourselves what if, I do believe that sits from an idea of not, almost shame, of not wanting to know or appreciate that there might be an alternative. And because we fear that idea of exploring that curiosity, we then lose and we take away from the capability of us being able to change the way we see a perspective, see a situation, and therefore we rob ourselves of the ability to actually contribute in a better and a more healthier way, in a more resilient manner. And for me, that is the beauty about what I see, is that a lot of the time we erode the opportunity for us to create a more sustainable environment. We marginalize, we shrink everything down to, I am,
Yeah.
they are. And then at the end of the day, we make this weight on our own shoulders as well as on everybody else who then we interact with. We then
Right.
remove the ability to be resilient, and we also then remove that ability for that change. And I really found a lot of inspiration through a lot of the journey that you have walked and a lot of the stories that you shared, because I think there's a lot of vulnerability in what you've talked about, a lot of openness about you. You need to be able to talk to somebody. You need to be able to share with somebody. You need to be able to connect. And for us to be able to be resilient, we can't behave like robots. We cannot have this view that we are go, go, go. And at the end of the day, we find ourselves either feeling isolated, feeling detached, feeling lonely, but not appreciating the fact that we have created a lot of that context that we find ourselves in. And that
Yeah.
context that we then create then starts to really erode into every facet of our life. And I love that fact that, you took me through that journey where, did this news article impact my day, impact my month, right? And I framed it incorrectly. I looked at it in a way that didn't open up that curiosity. And I created that stress, that pain, that heaviness. And I then wasn't looking after my well-being because I didn't ask myself the right questions to allow for that change to come through. And we talked about how you can read things in a book. You can be logical and theoretically thing is do 1, 2, and 3. Open mindset looks like 1, 2, 3. Leading a team looks like 1, 2, 3. I've read the book. I've got the T-shirt, and hell, I might be even in a podcast talking about it, right? But the reality comes in the actions, in the deed of really unpacking some of the hard / or rather the uncomfortable things. And we it's uncomfortable. We tend to gravitate away from that, right? And that's a natural thing. But we are also humans in our leadership journey, regardless of the title. And I think the one major aspect about what I've really appreciated in this discussion is that the vulnerability, the shame, we need to have the courage to be able to step beyond that, because the value that that destroys in not only the weight that we carry, the resilience and the burden and potential burnout, just by carrying these assumptions of what somebody might think, what a KPI might mean, everything associated to our own heads, within our own heads, within the lack of communication. That is essentially what really creates a burnout. And for me, I've really appreciated the discussion, because I'm not going to drop 20 pounds today, but to build the right culture, we have to set the right environment, set the right community, and then start that journey. And whether it is through gratitude, through accountability with I call it a life accountability partner, as opposed to be a gym, as opposed to a gym accountability partner. But we have to be able to work on these elements bit by bit, without shame, with curiosity, and with the courage that we can be more and do better. I've really enjoyed, Yosi, this conversation about a lot of things, but that building that resilience. And for me, it shows us that the best leaders aren't necessarily the ones who never fall apart. It's actually those that really connect with people, that are able to be vulnerable and open, and the rest of it. So for me, I'd really like to thank you for taking the time out today.
Thank you.
Sharing this session. And for anybody who wants to connect and be in touch with you, how might they be able to do that?
Yeah, the best place, thank you, Ziggy. The best place is LinkedIn. Go to my LinkedIn page. If you could put the link into the show notes, then there's a button there. People can book a free session with me just to have a chat.
Wait, hold on. Yes, did you say free session?
I said free. Free 30 minutes, man. Free 30 minutes.
So somebody can get free 30 minutes with you, just to really understand what might. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Free 30 minutes. If they go to your LinkedIn, links in the bio. I don't know why you're wasting time. I would have stopped by now listening to whatever the hell I got to say, because I'm not giving you no free 30 minutes of this. Yeah. Any other way, Yosi, if they do want to catch you? LinkedIn is the best way.
Right now, it is the best way. One of these days, I'll get a website, but right now, that's the place.
Perfect. And I think for me, one thing that we've really picked out and fleshed out across this episode is really ties into one of the T4L programs, or one of the courses, which is associated to the heart of leadership. Because really, to be a transformative leadership, you really need to be able to have a level of empathy. You need to understand yourself, be kind to yourself, work with yourself, build yourself, but even more so, be kind to others, understand others, and ask yourself, what if I don't understand? What if I'm not the right one? What if what I think is not what it is? And this conversation has really supplemented a bit of that course content, but even more so for me, I do hope that this has impacted lives and impacted somebody within their journey and within any struggle that might be going through. Yosi, again, I'd really love to thank you. For anybody who has got a lot more interest, please like and subscribe to this podcast, but even more so, go over to the LinkedIn. Go over to the LinkedIn page and really get to understand what Yosi is all about. Yosi, from me to you, thank you very much, and really appreciate you taking the time.
You're very welcome. Take care, man.
Take care.
This podcast is brought to you by Transformation Leader. You can follow us at www.t4leader.com.